Hello, this year is being recorded after Pesach, but it was given during Pesach in Road of Sholem in Atlantic City. The topic of this year is related to Pesach and Matzah, but the overall topic is the well-known debate whether mitzvahs tzrichas Kavanah. When you do a mitzvah, whether it requires for you to have intention to do that mitzvah, and or you don't. Now, intent is very important in our religion, halachic-wise, in so many things. I'll give you maybe a couple examples. The first example is when we intend to do a mitzvah, and we don't wind up doing it for whatever reason, but as long as you had intent to do a mitzvah, you get schar for it. You get merit, you get reward. Machshava tova mitztarefes l'maisa. We count it as if you actually did the mitzvah. Now, whether it's the exact same reward or not, I don't know. I'm not sure anybody knows, but at least you certainly get credit for it, for wanting to do a mitzvah. The good thing is that if you want to do an Avera and then you change your mind, the intent to do an Avera does not give you any sort of onus or punishment. So this is one thing about intent. There is, of course, a very important halacha with intent. It has to do with pigul. We're just learning all the parshas with the karbanas. If a Kohen had bad intention, he had in mind while he's doing certain parts of the avoda, and he has in mind, for example, to eat the sacrifice out of its place, out of its time, all those things. If he just had that intent, that alone makes the animal pigul, and you can't eat it. Now, there are actually three different aspects of intention by a mitzvah. They're all almost the same, but they're slightly different. The first one is that you must intend to do it for the mitzvah. If, for example, you are saying Shema while you just want to check the Sefer Torah that it's correct, and you're mumbling the words or mouthing the words to make sure that all the letters are in there in the Torah, you had no intention to do the mitzvah. Your intention was to check the Sefer Torah. You do not get credit for it, and as you know, we have to say the Shema twice every single day. Once when we get up, once when we lie down. It is actually a biblical mitzvah, and it applies all times. And again, that one, if you intended to do it for another reason, you are not yotzei. Now, the second is that you have to intend, when you're doing a mitzvah, that you are fulfilling the mitzvah. That you are, with this action, want to fulfill the mitzvah. When you're shaking a lulav, you're shaking it because it's a mitzvah to do it, and that's the reason you're doing it. Different than the first one, that you're doing it because it's just for the purpose of a mitzvah. The second one is that you're doing it because you want to fulfill the obligation of the mitzvah. You are, with this, making a declaration that I have now done my part to fulfill this mitzvah. So to review again, the first one, let's say by lulav, you have to intend that the reason you're shaking it because it's a mitzvah to shake it. And the second one is that you're doing it because it's not only a mitzvah, but with this action, you're fulfilling that mitzvah. You're yotzei the mitzvah. And the third one is very simple, that you have to intend that you're doing it because Hashem told you to do it. For no other reason. This is the reason you're doing it. This is part of your intent because Hashem told me to do it. I always say that why is Shabbos holy? People give me the answer because, what do you mean? God created the world in 6 days. Hashem created the world in 6 days. And on the 7th day he rested, so that's why it's holy. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't understand why just because Hashem rested, that's why that day becomes holy. He rested, that's very good. So we'll rest. But why is it holy? What makes it holy? Almost nobody can give me the answer. The answer is very clearly, it's holy because Hashem said so. Vaikadesh oso. Hashem sanctified that day to be holy, and that's the reason it's holy. So again, the third intention we have to have is that we are doing it because Hashem told us to do so. That's why it says in the Torah all the time, Kasher Tziva Hashem Moshe. Every time. Vayas Moshe. Why? Kasher Tziva Hashem Moshe. Because Hashem commanded Moshe. That's why Moshe did it, and that's why we have to do it, because it's a mitzvah. Rather, because Hashem told us to do it. So, everyone agrees, by the way, even though there's a debate whether you have to have intention or you don't have to have intention, everyone agrees that if you deliberately have intention not to fulfill the mitzvah, everybody agrees that you have not fulfilled your requirement. For example, if you are teaching a child how to count sphera, and you are saying the bracha, or even without a bracha, you're telling him what day it is, but your intention is clearly that you do not want to be yotze with that. You want to do it later with a minyan and shul or whatever it is, that you are not yotze because you specifically had intention not to be yotze the mitzvah. And in this case, even the people that say that you do not need intention, a negative intention, so to speak, is, according to everybody, good enough that it does not qualify you to have fulfilled the mitzvah. Now, there's a difference of opinion whether the idea that you have to have intention by mitzvah, whether this is a midaraisa, that means whether it's biblical, or is it only midrabanan, rabbinical. Most people, and when I say people I mean poskim, most poskim hold that it's biblical. So if you did a mitzvah and you did not have the intentions that I recited above, then if you have to repeat the mitzvah, because it's a biblical mitzvah to have intention. And if you didn't do it, you weren't yotze. Now, if that's the case, you would have to do over the mitzvah, but certainly you do not have to repeat the bracha, because the mitzvah is midaraisa, so you have to redo it. But the bracha, all brachas, with the exception of one, which is Birchas HaMazon, possibly another Birchas HaTorah, but except for benching and Birchas HaTorah, all brachas are rabbinical, and therefore you do not repeat the bracha. Now, what if a mitzvah is only rabbinical to start off with? Then almost everybody agrees that if it's a mitzvah midrabanan and you didn't have intention, then you do not have to repeat the mitzvah. Because since we don't know whether you need kavanah or you don't need kavanah, we don't know, it's a debate whether we need intention or not intention, and we have a rule that when it comes to mitzvahs of the rabbanan, we go lenient. And this is a mitzvah, if it's a mitzvah rabbanan, we're lenient and we do not make you repeat it. By the way, that's the same reason why in the case before, even if it's biblical, but the blessing is only midrabanan, and therefore we also go lenient, and you do not repeat the bracha. Now, I want to point out a few sort of exceptions to this rule. Some poskim say that if it's a mitzvah that you're doing with your mouth, you're talking, speech, for example, like sphera, some poskim say that even if you hold that otherwise you do not need kavanah, that you hold that mitzvahs do not need intentions, in these mitzvahs that you do by actually enunciating words, even the people who hold you don't need intention, by those mitzvahs, they say that you do need intention. Now, there is sort of an exception to all the things that I've just said, that if you are doing a mitzvah, and it is obvious that the reason you're doing a mitzvah is because it's God told us to do this, and it's something that you're doing for no other reason except because it is something that as Bnei Yisrael, as Jews, we were commanded to do those mitzvahs. Everybody agrees that you do not have to repeat it and that you really don't have to have specific intention. Let me give you a prime example. A prime example is if you're putting on tefillin. When you're putting on tefillin, of course, ideally, you should have intentions that you're doing it because of the mitzvah. But there could be no mistaken that the reason you're putting on tefillin is because of the mitzvah. Otherwise, nobody would just take leather straps and put it around their arms, wrists, and place it on their heads. So it's obvious that you're doing it because it is a mitzvah. Therefore, you may not necessarily be required to have intention. This reminds me of the joke that there were these people sharing a room in a hospital, lo aleinu, and one of them was Jewish, one of them wasn't, and then one morning, the Jew takes out his tefillin and starts putting on his tefillin, and the Gentiles next to him looks at him, he says, look at these big shot Jews. He's in here only one day and already he's taking his own blood pressure. Now, we know that's not the case when you put on tefillin. So, as I said before, it's obvious that when somebody puts on tefillin, it's because it's a mitzvah, and therefore you don't need kavanah. Now, there is another thing that I want to mention, which is very, very important, that there are two mitzvahs that everybody, bar none, say that you must have kavanah. Even those that say that by other mitzvahs you do not need attention, these two mitzvahs definitely need kavanah. The first one is the first pasuk of Shema. When you say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, you must have intention. Otherwise, you must repeat it. And the second one is the first bracha of Shmona Esrei. From Baruch, when you start, until Baruch Atah Hashem Mogen Avram, you have to have kavanah, intention, understand what you're saying, and mean what you're saying. And if you do not, you have to repeat from the beginning. I actually had a case where I did not have intention, and I had to repeat it. And then the problem was that this is true, the problem was when I repeated it, again I didn't have intention. So I asked my Rav, what should I do? So he tells me, and not sure if he was joking or not, but he says, look, if you forgot it 2 times already, chances are you'll forget a 3rd time, so don't bother. But notwithstanding this, if you do not have intention by the first bracha of Shemona Esrei, very important to repeat it. Now, let's go to another area now that has to do with our holiday that we just passed. And again, when I made this drasha, it was the first night of Yom Tov. So we're going to talk about eating matzah. We all know that it is a biblical mitzvah to eat matzah. Everybody knows this. It's midaraisa. You have to have a kazayis matzah, certainly the first night. And if you don't do that, you're in violation of a very important positive commandment. Now, there is, however, an additional requirement, which we all know, and that is when you eat the matzah, you have to lean to the left. Now, maybe when you're looking at this at the video, it's going to look like I'm leaning to the right, but I'm leaning to the left. And you have to eat the matzah leaning. Now, what you don't know maybe is that according to many opinions, this idea of leaning while eat the matzah is also biblical. And therefore, if you ate the matzah and you did not lean, then you have to do the mitzvah again. There's also a similar discussion because we have to drink 4 cups of wine. And what if you didn't lean by the 4 cups of wine? There is actually a lot of discussion where you have to drink it over again. Certainly, again, once more, you do not repeat the blessing. As I said before, you never repeat the blessing, but you have to drink over the 4 cups of wine. So I've done a little research on this. It's very comprehensive. Halacha, it entails a lot of things. But the bottom line is, it appears that if you did not lean by the first 2 cups, you should drink them over again. But if you forgot by the 3rd or 4th cup of wine, you should not drink more, because we're only supposed to drink 4 cups, and if you're going to repeat it, the 3rd or 4th cup is going to look like you're drinking 5 or 6 cups, and we don't want that. We don't want to give that impression. The reason we can repeat it by the first 2, because they are still before and during the meal and before benching, and you can drink as much wine as you want during the Suda, so nobody's going to say that you're drinking extra cups because there is more than 4 cups required for the mitzvah. Now, a couple of side rules that I wanted to give you. First of all, I wanted to tell you that in the time of the Gemara, women were exempt from reclining, because the whole purpose of reclining is to show chayrus, freedom, royalty, that we're relaxed and we have nothing, nobody over us, nobody bossing us, we're not slaves, and so on. So women at the time of Gemara were exempt because what were they doing? They weren't so free. We all know. They're in the kitchen, they're working, they're cleaning, they're serving the food, cleaning it up. So they're not going to feel like royalty just because they're leaning to the left for a minute. So in time of the Gemara, they were exempt from leaning, unless, as the halacha says, they were considered an isha chashuva. If they were an important woman, certainly if they were in fact royalty, or maybe a very distinguished person, they would be required to lean because they have this royalty sense about them. But otherwise, in the time of Gemara, women were not required to lean. Nowadays, all women are considered women of stature, isha chashova, and they too should recline. Nevertheless, the Ashkenazi minhag is for women not to recline, and I believe the Sephardi minhag is that they do recline. In either case, if they didn't recline, either by the matzah or the wine, the women do not have to repeat the mitzvah. Now, just one important note I want to add, that even though we say that women are exempt from reclining, they nevertheless are not yotzei if they ate the matzah standing. They must sit or recline. Standing is a no-no, and they have to eat over again. Now, what about a son who's sitting by his father's table? Is it a sign of disrespect that he should lean? And the answer is no. A son by his father's table has to recline. A student, a Talmud in front of his Rebbe, should not recline unless the Rebbe gave him specific permission that it's okay. Otherwise, it's disrespectful and he should not recline. So let me just repeat. As I said before, by the wine, there's an argument whether you repeat it or not. Certainly by the first two, you may, and by the last two, you shouldn't. And by the matzah, if you did not recline, or even if you forgot whether you reclined or you didn't, you must repeat eating the matzah. You must do the mitzvah again because it's a biblical mitzvah. And if it's suffik deraisa, if there's a doubt in the biblical mitzvah, you have to do it again. And now we come to the question of the day. Here's the situation. I was actually asked this question while I was by my cousin's house, Sidney Teichman, in California, and he's very close with the Tulin Rebbe, and he had the Tulin Rebbe on the phone, and we were asked the following question. What happens if there's a group of people at a Seder, and everybody's eating the matzah, and the Rebbe was there too? So if the Rebbe was there, nobody else at that table should have reclined. And certainly was not required to recline. But what happens if somebody was sitting there and he did not realize that the Rebbe was there as well? So, just for a moment, I just want to tell you, when I say he didn't realize, we'll get into it later whether he didn't realize or he did realize. Correct that. We'll analyze later if he forgot whether he reclined or he didn't realize that his Rebbe was there, and therefore he should have been required to recline because he didn't realize the Rebbe was there. Then you have to recline. Now, if he knew the Rebbe was there, once again, I know it's a little complicated, but if he knew the Rebbe was there, he does not have to recline. But now that he did not realize that the Rebbe was there, and he should have reclined, but he didn't recline anyway, in spite of the fact that he didn't know his Rebbe was there, he did not recline. So actually, he went against the halacha. The halacha is that if you have to recline, the exemption is only if your Rebbe is there, but he didn't know the Rebbe was there. So must he now eat again, once more, and this time have intention that I should have reclined, but I'm not reclining because my Rebbe is there, or maybe he should even go out of the room and eat another piece of matzah where there is no Rebbe so he can be yotzei the mitzvah of reclining. So, in effect, the question is the reverse of mitzvahs tzaricha kavanah. Does one need to have intention when not doing a mitzvah that he otherwise would have been required to do? Does he need intention that he is not doing it because he is exempt? So in this particular case, if we hold that he has to have that intention, he did not have that intention because he didn't even realize the Rebbe was there, so he is not yotzei, and he has to eat again because he refrained from reclining not because he knew he was exempt. He just didn't recline. So let's try to come up with the answer to this. Let's try to analyze this whole business of having to recline when you're eating matzah. Let's try to understand it. Are we talking about two separate mitzvahs? There is a biblical mitzvah to eat matzah, and there is a biblical mitzvah to recline. And it just so happens that both of these mitzvahs are accomplished simultaneously. But there is, in fact, two separate mitzvahs. Or do we say, no, there's only one mitzvah. There's only one mitzvah of eating matzah. And the way to do this mitzvah is by reclining. In other words, one of the aspects of matzah is that you have to recline. There are many aspects in every mitzvah. Certain mitzvahs have certain places you got to be, certain shiurim, certain size, and reclining is just one of the factors that go into accomplishing the mitzvah of matzah. But it's only one mitzvah. Eating, reclining is only one. Now, maybe you could say that depending whether it's one mitzvah or two mitzvahs, that will determine whether this person who, in a regular case, did not recline, whether he has to repeat the matzah again. If you hold it's one mitzvah, and part of the way of doing the mitzvah is that you have to recline, if you did not recline, you didn't do the mitzvah in its entirety. Part of the mitzvah required reclining, and you didn't recline, then you would have to do it over. But if we say there are two mitzvahs, and someone did it without reclining, then he still accomplished the mitzvah of eating matzah, he just didn't accomplish the mitzvah of reclining. So therefore, we do not tell him to eat over the matzah again. He's already accomplished that. The only thing he didn't accomplish was reclining. And, it's sort of like too late now. Maybe you'll recline by some of the other things. But it's too late for him for this mitzvah of matzah, because this mitzvah of matzah he already accomplished. Now, we can try to bring a proof that there are two mitzvahs, because we see that a woman, according to some opinions, do not have to recline. Yet they are fulfilling the mitzvah of matzah. And if reclining was part of the mitzvah of matzah, how are the women ever accomplishing the mitzvah of matzah if they're not reclining? So we can actually prove maybe that it's two mitzvahs. One mitzvah of eating matzah and one mitzvah of reclining. And women only have the mitzvah of matzah. They do not have the mitzvah of reclining. And all is well. Every time they eat matzah, they get a mitzvah. But the truth is, it's not a proof. Because even if we say that it's one mitzvah, and reclining is an aspect of that mitzvah that requires you to recline when you eat matzah, we can still say that it's one mitzvah, but that aspect of the mitzvah that requires reclining does not apply to women, and women have accomplished the entire mitzvah because the so-called the ingredients in that mitzvah is different from men and for women. And women can accomplish that mitzvah without reclining. So even if we say it's one mitzvah by men, it's one mitzvah by women also, but the factors that go into the mitzvah by women does not include reclining. So really we have no proof whether it's one mitzvah or two mitzvahs. Now let's get back to our question. When somebody was sitting by the Rebbe and he did not know that the Rebbe was there and he did not recline, let's analyze this, what we can come up with. We can say that in this case, there is no difference whether it's one mitzvah or two mitzvahs, because if the Rebbe was there, then the aspect of reclining, even if it's one mitzvah, that aspect is being exempt because the Rebbe was there. So he never was required to recline, and therefore the obligation of reclining was never the aspect of the mitzvah, and therefore he may not have to eat over again. Certainly, if we hold that there are two mitzvahs, we certainly should believe that he does not have to eat over again, because if it's two mitzvahs, the mitzvah of matzah he already accomplished. And the mitzvah of reclining, whether he knew about it or he didn't know about it, he either didn't fulfill it because he didn't recline, or rather the other way around. Either he fulfilled it because the Rebbe was there, and we hold that he didn't need to have intention to be exempt, or he just won't be exempt. He won't get the credit for reclining, but nevertheless, he certainly will get credit for the matzah because we hold it's two separate mitzvahs. So in that case, we certainly hold that he does not have to eat the matzah over again. So in summary, we have not really come up with an answer whether one needs to have intention when not doing a mitzvah, that he is not doing it because he is exempt. Here, this person did not recline. He didn't have an intention that he's not reclining because the Rebbe was there, because he didn't even know the Rebbe was there. Nevertheless, he didn't recline, and we still don't know whether he will actually get the mitzvah incomplete or not. So we're going to have to wait for Mashiach to come to find that answer. But a more serious question is, as we said before, we said before that even according to the people that say that you don't need intention, if you have a negative intention, if you deliberately intend not to be Yotze the mitzvah, everybody agrees that you're not Yotze the mitzvah. If you're counting the bracha, if you're saying the sphera with or without a bracha, and you do not intend, or rather you specifically intend not to be Yotze, everybody holds you're not Yotze. Even the people that hold that you don't need intent, a negative intention voids the whole mitzvah. So here is the final question. In our case, where somebody is sitting by his Rebbe, we already discussed that he didn't know his Rebbe was there, he didn't recline, he was exempt, but he didn't realize it was exempt, whether he gets credit for it or not. But that somebody was sitting by his Rebbe, and he absolutely did not know the Rebbe was there, but he said, I am not reclining because I don't feel like reclining. Now, is he in trouble? He really didn't have to recline because his Rebbe was there. But does he get credit because regardless whether he said he doesn't want to recline or not, he didn't have to recline. So does that negative so-called intention violate the whole mitzvah? And I don't have an answer for that either. Hopefully Mashiach will come soon, or I'll do a little more research. Thank you for listening. You can call me at 516-782-8099 because I'm sure parts of this drasha was a little complicated. I didn't really have any preparation when I said it now, and I may have not been as clear as I would have liked to. Thank you once again.